Hello everybody, Justin from Lame Board Games here, and today I got 5 rogue cards that you should give a second chance to. These are cards, once again, that I've looked at our Discord channel and got some suggestions from them, but also looked at myself, and cards that I've liked playing once I gave them a second chance are cards that I think still maybe deserve a second look, even though I've given them, like only one look, right? Like, maybe these cards are better than anticipated. Let's dive in right away, get started with our first card here, which is Copycat. So this is a level 3 Gambit skill, commits for a wild, but that's not all it commits for. After commit Copycat to a skill test, search the discard pile of another investigator for a skill you can commit to this test and commit it. After this test ends, place that card on the bottom of its owner's deck. I can already hear some people saying, but we don't run enough skills as a group. And my counter to that is that if someone in your group can play good skills, and if someone in your group can play Copycat 3, I think you should look at playing more of those skills that are really good. There are a lot of powerful skills that exist in this game, and being able to play them multiple times, or even outside of class, is a very powerful thing. I do think that this card scales up exponentially when you get more players involved, and obviously is awful, and actually, like, you'd never want to play it in solo. However, you can still even play this at 2 players, I think, and still have a really good time and get a lot of value out of it. So, what this card does on its face value is very simple to comprehend and grok, and why this card actually might be good enough to have a second chance for. However, it goes a little bit deeper than that. One of the strongest things you can do in a game, besides like cost reduction, is recursion. And this is a form of recursion in multiple ways. It's not continual recursion in the sense that it's not like scavenging where you can continually loop an ice pick. That's like easy recursion to see the broken value for. But this card provides powerful recursion in, as I said, 2 forms. The first one is simple to see on the tin, which is just when you commit the card, you get to double up on another skill card and you get to recur it. However, what it also does is that skill card that was played, you then place it on the bottom of its owner's deck, which means that in time, whether it be by that player drawing through their deck, or that player shuffling their deck, or that player searching through the deck, they get to play that powerful skill for a 3rd time. So that means this one skill, let's just look at like brute force for an example, right? Say your survivor used a brute force, they dealt 3 damage to something. They then resourceful it back, brute force it, do it again. Then you play Copycat, you use that brute force, you put it on the bottom of their deck, they eventually dig it out, and then they do that brute force again. That's one brute force getting 4 plays, which is just incredible for one card. Yes, you needed other cards to do this, but in a way, what these cards are doing is being additional copies of those decks, of those cards in your deck. And Copycat is like exactly what it says on the tin. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it very well. There are tons of skills like Vicious Blow, Deduction. Seeing those multiple times is like a really nice thing and will probably win you the game. Yes, it is a little bit hungry XP-wise, I'm going to admit that, but I think that like if you work together as a team, being able to put stuff together like this is a very powerful effect. Okay, next up we got Black Market. So this is a card that I initially underrated, and then I thought very highly of it, and then it kind of just fell out of favor and I've stopped playing it. But this card is a house, and it definitely deserves a second chance from me, and also probably from you, because I imagine maybe you played it a bunch and then you stopped playing it. So Black Market, if you don't know, is a 1 cost, 2 experience favor, fast, play at the start of the investigation phase. 1 at a time, reveal cards from the top of any investigator's decks until exactly 5 cards have been revealed. Set those cards aside out of play. While set aside, any investigator may play any of those cards as if they were in their hand. At the start of the next investigation phase, shuffle each of those cards set aside into its owner's decks. So what this card actually does is a fast draw 5. Those 5 cards might not stay in your hand by the time, you're probably not going to be able to play all of them, and it doesn't synergize well with, like, skills because you can't play them. You have to, like, play the cards, you can't commit the skills, and it also might not synergize with events that don't have, like reactionary events are going to be harder to trigger. But with assets and, like non-passive, like active events, it's going to hit and essentially just be drawing you a full mitt of cards from your deck. Like, I don't think it's wrong to even just do this from 5 from your deck, right? But what this also does is you can, like, spread it out. Like, say, for example, your goon has a hard time finding their weapon. They've just been unlucky, their draw, their mulligan, like, it's just not happening. When you play Black Market, you can, like, be like, all right, you are going to look at the top 5, and we're going to see if we can find you a weapon. Maybe they find their weapon, maybe they find some economy. What this now allows them to do is play that economy, and then also, like, I don't know, maybe play their weapon, or alternatively, if they have the economy already, because, they've been trying to draw their cards, they can play their weapon, but someone else, right, may play the economy to get, like, their thing going. So what this essentially does is draw 5 cards for the entire table fast, which is really powerful. There's a lot that you can do as well to synergize with, like, crazy comp builds to move between it, which I think is getting better and better as Arkham gets bigger and bigger, and we might see a reason for that showing up on another card as well in the future. But this is a card that I originally was very down on. I just saw this one as a little bit memey. However, I think those cards that I originally thought were memey, that Travis, Brent, and I were like, why would you ever play this? I think now that the card pool is big enough and that you can do enough kind of like broken things outside of it that you're efficient enough that you can make up for it in other ways. So, like, basically, like, the economy and, like, card draw and, like, resource generation is so good now that you can do the memey things and, like, be actually very good at them. For example, when we played our Scarlet Keys rerun, and Carson Sinclair gave Daniela a runic axe, and it was the strongest I've ever felt playing Arkham Horror. So we're going to flag all of these cards that let you play from other people's things because they are very powerful effects. Okay, next up here we got Adaptable. This is a card from Dunwich Legacy, so this has been in the game for a very long time. This is a 1 experience talent asset. It's a permanent, and in between each game of a campaign, you may swap up to 2 level 0 cards out of your deck in exchange for an equal number of level 0 cards. You must still follow all deck building rules for your investigator. So, I think that, you may disagree, but I think that a lot of reason why Adaptable isn't played is because I imagine most people actually just play with Adaptable as a passive rule that anyone can use at their table. Not in the sense of, like, the real and franchise players who are like, why would I break the rules when I want to follow the rules? But I imagine that a lot of people just passively use this in their game as an effect that they can just do, especially when they're not too knowledgeable in deck building. However, if you are, wanting to follow the game as written, which is, props to you for that, you can do that with Adaptable. Again, I don't think it's, like, wrong for players who do this. We actually did it as well, but it obviously, doing that kills the value of a card that I think is worth a second chance. And now, let me tell you why. A big reason for that is that this card is essentially a sideboard card. If you don't know what that means, in most competitive card games, we're going to talk about Magic the Gathering here as our main example, there's something called a sideboard, which is roughly, like, Magic is 15 cards, I believe, and I don't know what other formats, like what other games have for their sideboard rules, but usually a competitive game is best of 3, right? So after the first game, you can switch out cards from your deck with cards in your sideboard, which allow you to tech your deck for what your opponent is doing. You can counter cards that your opponents are playing, or play cards that are more advantageous against a deck that otherwise you don't want to bring to the normal metagame in the field. Arkham Horror kind of does the same thing. Scenarios will challenge you in different ways, and being able to tech against them is a very powerful thing. A good example of this is that people commonly bring Fine Clothes to the first 3 scenarios of the Forgotten Age, and then they upgrade out of them. However, what you could also do is take advantage of Adaptable to change those into other level 0 cards that might be able to tech further along into the campaign. I think this is becoming more and more doable because level 0 cards are just getting stronger and stronger. So like, for example, if you are starting a scenario and you have like, you want to like play 2 of your wolf mask, right? But you eventually buy you buy backpack 2 as part of your upgrade plans. You could upgrade your wolf mask into something else, or you could turn one of those wolf masks, keeping one into your deck because it's easier to dig out with your backpack, into another item or supply asset with Adaptable for free. Just that one experience that you did it, and you can just keep swapping depending on the scenario you are playing. I think this is something that a lot of people don't want to do because you can kind of just like make it through a lot of scenarios pretty easily. But like, even looking at Hemlock Vale, I think a lot of scenarios in that campaign are asking slightly different things, and being able to game those with Adaptable I think is a very powerful effect, and that's why I think that Adaptable is worth a second chance. So that's why it made it on the list here. I recently brought it myself when I was trying to play every card back in 2023, where I brought this into a campaign and I swapped every scenario, and the value that I got out of that one experience was actually insane. Not in the terms of like the XP value. I don't consider like that to be too much of a thing that I worry about with Adaptable. Being able to change my level 0 cards from scenario to scenario to also fill holes in my deck where I felt like things were a little bit weak was a very powerful effect. So that's why I'm very happy with Adaptable, and I think it's worth a second chance. Next card we got here is Disguise. This card is, I think, very good. A very good level 0 card, and also probably pretty good with Adaptable. So Disguise is a 3-cost level 0 talent, trick, illicit asset. It uses 4 supplies. You can spend a supply as an action to evade. You get +2 foot for this evasion attempt. If you succeed and the evaded enemy is non-elite, it does not ready during the next upkeep phase. For the remainder of this card, I'm going to call that effect freezing, because that's just like a good shorthand to refer to an evaded enemy not readying during the next upkeep phase. So let's start there. Let's start with the freezing. This is something that early on in Arkham, I wish we had for evasion right off the bat, because I do think that it would have made evasion a lot better from day one. Before this, like, you look at the 3 cards, the cycle of cards in the core set and their effects. So I'm talking about the staples, Deduction and Vicious Blow. Those are both in the core set. They were committing for an icon of what they were doing, of investigating or dealing damage, or combat rather, and they do a positive. They do a boost. You're turning your card into a better of the action you're doing. So in Deduction, nice and simple, you get a clue. Vicious Blow, nice and simple, you deal +1 damage. Our third card here of this easy to see action cycle is Survival Instinct, which gives you a foot, and you may evade an additional enemy, I believe. That was what saw their value of evasion in the early game. And I understand the theory, right? But the problem is that evading an additional enemy wasn't good enough, right? Like, it is in some campaigns. I'm not going to say here, because I think Survival Instinct is a playable card in like some campaigns, like Forgotten Age is a great example of it. I'd even say in Hemlock it's probably a good example of it. But it's not the same value, and it's why evasion fell out of line, because killing an enemy was just the correct choice the majority of the time. Eventually, in Forgotten Age, I believe it was, we saw our first freezing card, which was the rogue card Slip Away, where you add your book to your foot. And then, what that did is it froze the enemy if they were non-elite. And it's the same thing here. So freezing essentially turns off the enemies for 2 turns, which is very important because it gives you that turn off to potentially get ahead, move away, deal some, like, get out a weapon, like, set yourself up. And then that enemy doesn't even ready during the next turn. So, for example, if another enemy showed up, you can deal with that enemy with that weapon you just played and then evade, or like, and then deal with the enemy that just evaded. Or you can move away and get far enough away that that enemy is not going to be a problem anymore. Freezing is a very efficient way to get ahead on evasion that didn't really exist for a long time with evasion. So now you can use this card to freeze an enemy for 4 times. You basically get 4 slipaways, which is kind of insane. Slipaway, I think, is a strong card. I understand why people don't play it as much, because why would you want to evade when you can just kill an enemy, right? But being able to do that 4 times for only 1 card and one action to play it is really efficient. It also gives you +2 foot, which most rogues means you're going to be at like 6. You're going to be at 6 foot like baseline. With some of them, you're going to be at 7. This isn't including any other cards you commit, because a lot of rogue cards, like for example, Watch This, Nimble, right? Like these are all cards that you want to be committing to a test when you want foot, when you want high values. And then you also get things that are the part of the rogue's kit, like Lucky Cigarette Case, where you want to succeed by a high value to get like extra value on top of it. So Disguise, secretly and quietly, is doing all the things you want to do in Rogue while also freezing an enemy. And you get to do that 4 times. And you also get to joke about like funny things while you play the card. See Bryn as Trish disguising himself as Norman Withers, right? Like that's kind of like the fun jokes that can come from it. But this card is very powerful. I honestly have never been unimpressed when someone has played this card. I think this card is gangbusters and a very strong level 0 card, and I think you should give it a second chance if you have not. And you should give it a first chance, like if you give it a second chance if you wrote it off, but give it a first chance if you've never even looked at it. Our last card we're going to be talking about today is none other than an old classic that I used to write off, but I think is actually pretty damn good. And that is You Owe Me One. So this is from Circle Undone. This is a 0 cost event, Favor Gambit. Look at another investigator's hand. You may play a non-weakness card in that investigator's hand under your control. If you do, you and that investigator each draw a card. Now, when I say give this a second chance, I don't mean put this in any deck and just like throw it to the wind and be like, hey, I'm going to do this, you owe me one, I'm going to just see what you have, maybe you have something. Because that was the context in which we originally looked at this card, and we actually originally, like, I've seen how this card was played when it first came out. But now, if you just have, like, some sort of discussion, which you should have, like, some sort of discussion with the other players, you can, like, crack this out pretty good. This is also really good for a flex. When everyone else is set up, you can be like, hey, do you have any things in your hand that have just kind of been like, you're all set up that is just taking space that I can like take advantage of? And then you can like, you know, play it. This also replaces itself, and it replaces the card that the investigator originally had in their hand, which is just gravy on top of it. This card, while I can't give like a pitch that I can for Disguise, I think Disguise is probably like the capstone for this video. My perspective of these cards has changed, going back to that aforementioned Daniela run where I was given the Runic Axe through Teamwork. And Teamwork was a card that we originally wrote off. And I do think that You Owe Me One is just another version of that of Teamwork that is eventually going to be cracked at our table. We're going to do something like absolutely vile with it, and we're going to be like, wait a minute, this is actually like kind of sick, right? It's kind of sick. It doesn't do resources in the way that Teamwork does, which I think is actually like a thing that makes Teamwork like actually kind of like really pop off. But You Owe Me One can't really like, I can't be quiet about it. I think this card is going to be powerful at our table eventually. We just got to find it. There's an upcoming run on our channel where I played an Edge of the Earth sealed with Daniel from Quick Learner, and I think he had this in his Winifred deck. I think I might, or I had it in my Charlie deck. One of the two. I don't remember exactly what, but we were able to use it to good effect, especially with a limited collection. So like, if this can do like efficient things and help you get set up and kick ass in a limited collection, I can't wait to see what we eventually do with this card in like a non-limited collection, when we actually try to do some disgusting stuff with it, which I think is really cool. This is, yeah, thank God it's in the rogue class and not like, you know, like Seekers, because then they could buy some like really disgusting like high XP rogue cards and just go nuts with it. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. In a few weeks, I'm going to be back to do 5 cards from the Mystic class you should give a second chance to. Huge thank you to all our patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to support this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that usual YouTube stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.